17 rules for celestial dating are exactly the type of thing I would get handed growing up in church. The biggest rule is no dating before you are 16, and then after 16, you're only supposed to go on group dates until you turn 18.
I think it's great to keep young, stupid kids from making big mistakes.
I don't know what's more cringe than teenage pregnancy.
No saying I love you, only I oxytocin you.
Burst the door open. He's like, hey! Hey! Welcome back to Salty Saints. My name is Hayden Hull. I'm here today with my brother Tanner, and we're going to be talking about callings in the church. Do people actually serve harder when they're in bigger callings? We're going to be talking dating standards and rules in the church, as well as mission stories and personal revelation. All that and more on Salty Saints. And now for a cultural call-out. We sure don't appreciate that. Today's cultural call-out is the idea of serving harder when you're in a bigger calling. So I've seen this happen where somebody will get called to a very visible calling, like a stake president, serving in the high council, or something like that. And then they get released, they serve their term, they put in all the work, and it's great. And then they get called into like the primary or the nursery or something like that, and they end up going inactive or not really doing that great of a job. From what I understand, we're supposed to serve, anytime we get a calling, we're supposed to serve with our heart, might, mind, and strength. We're supposed to put everything we've got into every single calling we've got.
Well, I think it's especially prevalent around bishops and bishoprics, for sure.
Yeah.
I think bishops have a really hard time transitioning from being the leader of the ward to being anywhere else, really. I think that caused a lot of like listlessness and depression and all sorts of different, because I think that they get used to being needed all the time. And then they turn around and they have a different calling like nursery, and it doesn't register the same to them in terms of responsibility. So I think the knee-jerk reaction is to feel like I don't have to do as much because I'm in a easier, quote unquote, easier calling. But a lot of people do just kind of check out. You can go from elders quorum president to primary, or to some other smaller position, and then they just kind of coast. You're like, I'm just going to do my bare minimum, just relax for a little bit, see how it goes, kind of a thing. It's really tough because how do you combat that, right? Like, how do you encourage people like to take the little things seriously, so as seriously as the big things in their life? I don't think it's helpful at all, especially for smaller wards with limited positions and limited active members. Like, you need everyone to give 100%. And if someone can't go from elders quorum president to, CTR 8 and do a good job transitioning to that, then you're going to have a hard time.
President David O. McKay, while he was serving his mission in Scotland as a young man, he came across this inscription that said, "Whate'er thou art, act well thy part." And he created an entire talk about this, basically just pinpointing this problem and saying, you know what, it doesn't matter where you're serving. If you believe in personal revelation, if you sustain and support your leaders, you're going to give your all no matter where you serve. And so today I wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about examples or stories and experiences that we've had of leaders who may have had a bigger calling, and maybe they didn't, but the leaders who did serve well their part in a seemingly small calling. The first example that I can think of is Brother Blair. We had this young men's advisor. His name was Brother Blair, and this guy was really intense. So I think he had like some kind of sleeping disorder or something, if I remember correctly, where like he couldn't sleep more than like 3 hours at night, something like that. And so he got into like extreme sports. He was like an avid cyclist, a hiker, four-wheeler, snowmobiler, everything outside. He would love it. Our group in the ward was made up of basically, for all intents and purposes, a bunch of pale kids, a bunch of indoor enthusiasts. Our exercise every single day included things like maybe sitting on the couch and watching so much TV that we could recite commercials by heart, and maybe we'd push a vacuum, and sometimes even pushing that vacuum was a little tough. So,
well, you said, what do you call it the other? Oh, you said you called us the cast of Stranger Things.
That's right. That's right.
That was a good descriptor.
He had every reason to just plan a little high adventure to like a national or a state park where there's like water close by with bathrooms and a little tent pad and, you know, facilities around there that made it really easy for us. And that still would have been 10x what we were used to. However, Brother Blair decided that this group of pale kids, what they needed more than anything was to hike the tallest peak in the state of Utah, a state known for big mountains. So he planned out a hike to Kings Peak, which was like a 45-mile round-trip hike, and it was difficult, to say the least. Okay, turns out sitting around and vacuuming don't necessarily prepare you for a 45-mile round-trip hike. And so...
No, it's a lot easier in StarCraft 2 than it is in real life, right? So
100%. And so we get up to this mountain. I remember making it to the peak, and I remember it was a miserable hike for me. But I make it to the peak. I am basically shaking in my ankle-high FUBU shorts, and I realize that I was able to do hard things, that because of Brother Blair, I was able to do something that I never thought possible. And that really set me up to be able to accomplish other hard things in life, and it gave me like a mental attitude to realize that maybe I could do more difficult things, which helped me out on my mission, which helped me out in marriage, which helped me out in school and everything else. And so that's just one small example of someone who just went the extra mile, dug in their calling, and really made a difference in my life. But I don't know if you have any examples you wanted to share.
Oh, yeah, because I mean, I had other leaders, and all we did essentially with those other leaders was do like a cabin tour of the most wealthy people in the state, right? Like
right.
All your campouts was like, oh, we had all these wealthy members and they had these cabins, and so we would just drive up to the cabin and we'd have a weekend. And that was just comfortable and fun, but it didn't make us better in any way, right? Brother Blair, you know, the time I had with him was like, hey, it's the middle of winter. We're going to drive up the mountain as far as we can, and then we're going to snowshoe the rest into my completely snowed in cabin, and then we're going to eat steaks and watch old VSH movies, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, which was a great time. We were all exhausted, but we all had an amazing time. And that was a very low visibility calling, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like nobody was pushing him very hard. You know, nobody was like, he just took
he wasn't
a bunch
Young
of the
Men's
boys
president.
on the weekend.
Yeah, he was just an advisor.
Yeah, and all that happens during the week. None of it happens on Sunday. Nobody sees you doing that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just glad that you took the boys somewhere other than their house or the church building, you know? So that's like the bare minimum. That's the bar. Just get them away so everyone can, you know, have a break from the idiot boys. Yeah. But he took it a step further. Like, I'm going to make you something better. You know, I'm going to turn you into something a little bit better. We're going to do some hard things. So,
well, and that was his catchphrase. Like his catchphrase. Every time we went on a hike or any kind of big activity, he was always saying, "We're going to make a man out of you today." You know? Yeah. And
I'm glad he tried that. I mean, there's some kids I didn't think he would. Like, I remember one of the boys in our group. He showed up with a backpack that was half duct tape, and he had 12 family-sized cans of chunky soup in his backpack for this hike up Kings Peak. And so it was like he was carrying so much weight, and Brother Blair was like, "What are you doing?" You know,
hey, kid,
yeah. You pulled him aside and like, you got to fix your life a little bit, dude. So it was great to see him like correct and discipline and teach and inspire. Like, he did all those things.
He did,
and it was an entirely thankless calling. Because I know I never thanked him, right?
Oh, I remember.
I just complained.
I complained. I was right there with you. And absolutely, he did a great job handling those boys. There was another boy who showed up, and he brought, instead of a hiking backpack, he brought his school backpack, and he had his sleeping bag under his arm. And so Brother Blair had to like bungee cord it to the bottom of his school backpack. And it spanked him every single step, all of 45 miles.
That bag would come back and hit him right on the rear end every step he took.
So, like, by the end of the trip, he was just in tears because his butt hurt so bad.
But did anyone?
But he learned.
For him? No,
that's
right?
That's the thing. Like, he learned. Like, he learned how to be a man and how to just go through really uncomfortable things and how to get through it. You know, and that was really, really cool to see. Another leader that I had was super great, Cal Harris. He was a guy, I believe he was a former stake president. He might have even been a general authority. he was called as a youth Sunday school teacher over the 14-year-olds. And it was like me and 2 other kids. And every single week, he showed up and he had some kind of treat. And he never did like the, like, give an answer, I'll give you a treat kind of thing. He was always like, he would start off the class, give us these treats, and then he would teach us. And he was so passionate about the scriptures. I think he actually had a couple of PhDs in history and in different aspects of history. And so he would bring in that passion and talk about the Sanhedrin and cultural implications of different different sections in the scripture and different teachings and things like that. And it was just so powerful for me to see a leader that was actually super passionate about his calling. And I took the scriptures more seriously after seeing how excited he got about them. Those are just a couple of the stories that I have of leaders that served well, they acted well their part, no matter where they served. And I think that is where kids see the difference between like a member of the church and a disciple of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. And it's those low, quote unquote, low level callings that usually involve children. And so if you check out hardcore in your calling when you're helping teach the next generation, you're going to raise up a generation of brain dead kids who don't know why they go to church. Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like you need to work extra hard in those callings. And it's the, you know, it's the high visibility callings that really empower people to work extra hard, I guess. I don't know. Something about that peer pressure of everyone seeing you get some extra motivation there, which is too bad.
Yeah. So, for that reason, we call the culture to step up a little bit. Let's take it a little bit more seriously. Another piece before we wrap up is there may be an even lower level calling than all of these, and that is the calling of like mother and father. And that's a really important call out to make, because it's like if you can just do those parts well, it makes everybody else's job so much easier inside and outside of the church. So like if you can be a great mother and you learn your role and you learn your part as a father and you figure out how you're supposed to raise your kids, you do a good job with that. A, you set your kids up for success, but B, you also are able to help out their classmates, help out their leaders and everyone else that they're going to interact with to be able to actually help them. So that's another 100%. Little call out there. It's just like everyone has a calling in the church. Even if you aren't married, you might have a ministering assignment. It's like that could be a big difference too. Brother Blair was actually my home teacher. And no, I home taught him. And every single time I went to home teach him, he had a giant sized candy bar for me, like a big king size, like Butterfinger. He asked me what my favorite kind was. And then every time I went home teaching, he would give me that candy bar. And even at a young age, he and his wife were encouraging me because they would both give it to me and they were both super happy. And every time I went over there, they would ask me how I was doing. And then anytime my dad turned the time over to me to talk, they both listened very respectfully and reverently. And I was just like, whoa, this is really cool. So like even just being a ministering family, not even having the assignment, but just allowing someone else to minister to you can be a calling that you can do really, really well. For that reason, we call the culture to step up. Let's dig in. Let's serve not only when people are looking, but all the time.
And now it's time to consider the path of your feet, for crying out loud.
So today we've got another video from the Jen Psaki of anti-members, Alyssa Grenfell. The reason why we call her Jen Psaki is that she can spin anything to fit this negative narrative that she has. Do you remember when Jen Psaki, the big Afghanistan debacle that happened where like there were people literally hanging onto planes as they were flying out? That. They were like, please don't leave us to the Taliban. And Jen Psaki went on record saying like, we cannot call the Afghanistan evacuation anything but a success. Anyway, so I'm just going to throw that out there. But so we're going to listen to what she has to say about Mormon dating rules.
rules around dating growing up in my very devout Mormon home, and these 17 rules for celestial dating that someone posted on Reddit the other day are exactly the type of thing I would get handed growing up in church. The biggest rule is no dating before you are 16, and then after 16, you're only supposed to go on group dates until you turn 18. You're not really supposed to pair off and be boyfriend-girlfriend until the man has served a Mormon mission, which is 2 years, which means that at 18, as a girl, you're really only supposed to be dating men who are 20, 21, or older. Girls are told that they'll be a distraction to young men if they choose to date them too seriously before men serve their Mormon mission and accomplish their duty to God. Next, we've got 2 rules about making out, or what Mormon leaders often refer to as necking and petting. I was taught that before marriage, you should really only kiss someone in the way you would kiss them in front of your parents or Jesus himself. Definitely don't ever let them take you home, and never go into a bedroom with someone. And at BYU, it is against the school rules to enter a bedroom of someone of the opposite sex. This one cracks me up because it says you are not allowed to give back rubs, and those are reserved for married people. It does say that both young women and young men are expected to be modest, but if you look up the citation he's noted here in this book, you'll read that the entire page is about how girls should never wear shorts.
All right.
Wait.
There's a lot to unpack. I'll let you start. Where do you want to begin?
Okay. Couple things. This is some rando bishop just creating rules, right? So, thank goodness we have a well-organized, well-structured church that can help see these things and be like, no, we actually have, actual outlines and guidelines for these things. Random bishops just can't go and start making doctrine, right? So that's kind of nice. That's nice that we can acknowledge that. She's not acknowledging this, obviously. She's taking this, and it's very interesting at the beginning. She says, this is exactly the type of thing I would be handed in church. It's like, so you never actually got this when you were in, when she was young. That all that aside, so bishops shouldn't just go off making their own rules. Leave that for the strength of youth and things like that. She's obviously saying she got these kind of things when she was young. I don't remember getting anything like this. I remember having some guidelines like these, and all those guidelines, almost all those guidelines she read were actually like really good ideas. Like
no, they were cringe,
know, right?
No, they were weird.
They were bizarre. Like no serious dating until after your mission. Like she's complaining that 18-year-old girls can't date for marriage at age 18, which is a very anti-feminist thing to say. I think she's
how dare you
18-year-old girls to pair off immediately? Like shouldn't they go live their life and date less seriously? I thought that was the whole thing. Like, should you go hang out and French kiss and alone in a bedroom with your steady girlfriend of 3 years? Maybe not. Maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe that'll lead to some things that are really hard to recover from, So I don't see why these are bad things to put in place. And she doesn't really cover why they're not good. She just says that they're not good.
Right.
So,
it's just kind of a ha-ha kind of thing. Like, hey, look at how these silly guys and look at their silly little rules. And there's a couple of call-outs. First of all, I do agree with you that I've seen local leaders and maybe even professors at school that create these PowerPoint mini rules and laws and their own mini doctrine and stuff like that. And they pass that out to everybody. And I personally, this is my opinion, but every time a PowerPoint is created, a Pharisee gets its wings. And I think that's why I love this for the strength of youth is because what's really happening is a local leader or a professor or someone that's close to you is getting in the way of your personal revelation based off of the principles that were taught in For the Strength of Youth. Now, For the Strength of Youth, when we were growing up, was more specific. It did say things like no serious dating until you're about 16, and then just try and keep it to double dates and stuff like that. It was still pretty hands-off when we were growing up. The other point that I did want to call out is her language. So, if you noticed, she was calling, anytime she made mention about teenagers, she would calling teenage boys men, and she called the teenage young women, she called them girls. So it may be slight, but I did notice that. My ears did perk up a little bit, wait a second, she's calling these guys men when the age difference between an 18-year-old girl and a returned missionary is 2, maybe 3 years. So I don't know. It seemed like she was trying to create this weird power structure kind of thing she was trying to frame it a little nefariously, and I don't agree
honestly,
with that.
Like, let's not all like. Why are we pretending that the church isn't doing a huge favor to women by taking them out of the dating pool for a couple years while they're young and stupid? You know, like just take them out of that dating pool, let them mature on a mission for a couple years. You know?
Yeah,
let them grow up a little bit and let them come home a little more capable, a little more developed as a human.
yeah,
I think that does a huge thing for them. I don't think, you know, if I was a young woman at age 18, I probably wouldn't want to date a 19-year-old given how dumb 19-year-old boys are, right?
yeah.
Kick them off to spiritual boot camp for 2 years and let them come back actual men, you know?
Well, I think it was Cleon Skousen who said, I left for my mission as a man, and I arrived at my mission as a boy. You know? It made him realize, like, oh, man, the world is a big place, and you have to contend with that. And as a young man on a mission, you are face to face with so many different kinds of families, and you get to see firsthand the consequences of breaking the law of chastity, of single motherhood. You get to see all of these different types of families, and it kind of helps you to see the pathway of the different feet of these people that have chosen different paths and where that's going to lead you, so that when you get back home, you learn that lesson and you say, wait a second, I saw where being promiscuous, I saw where that pathway goes. And it's not a pathway that I want for myself. And I'm going to choose fidelity. I'm going to choose chastity. I'm going to choose a healthy, stable, happy family, because those were better off for the mother, the father, the children, everyone else. Everyone in the family is better off when everyone is staying together and they're happy. So I don't know. The other piece. Oh, hold on. I cut you off. What were you going to say?
I was going to say when I heard similar things when I was growing up, not to this extent, but I still had a girlfriend in high school. You know, I still did things that I thought as a young man I should do. These rules are here because a bishop saw that a lot of kids were messing up, and he wanted to give a guideline to them and their parents. He was really kind of overstepping. It's really it's really the parents should be doing this. Yeah. So what he's doing is he's trying to teach them over the parents, and the parents are not picking up the slack. So this is a parental failure. What we're seeing, these guidelines popping out. To the same point, they're just helpful guidelines, you know, like they're not doctrine, they're not anything like that. So
you didn't face any kind of discipline because you had a girlfriend in high school? Is that?
I wasn't, like ostracized. I couldn't pass a
excommunicated.
No, I had a girlfriend and it was just fine because I followed a lot of the other rules besides the, not steady dating one. But all the other ones, it's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do terrible things with your girlfriend. Like, okay, yeah, I'll follow that one, Yeah. Because it led to me not making any major mistakes or, things that could impact my future, spiritually or not. Like it helped me keep safe my future and prepare me to have a much healthier, stable family later on in life. So I think it's great to keep young, stupid kids from making big mistakes, because that's all it was. When you're a teenager, you're filled with hormones, you're going crazy. Like all the parents are trying to do is like help you survive that time of life, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, do we give them rules? Do we, what do we do? So if this is just like a panic response from a bishop trying to help the youth get through some of the hardest times of their lives. Yeah. And do I agree with those rules? No, like a couple of them are just silly, but most of them will lead to a really good time, just lead to a really peaceful life without major stress or drama, and just the headache of trying to deal with all those things. I didn't have to deal with because I followed most of those rules. Yeah,
you're touching down on a really important point, the difference between a standard and a law. So we have like the law of chastity, right? We have that has consequences when you break it, and there are serious big consequences that that we were talking about cringe earlier. I don't know what's more cringe than like teenage pregnancy, like being pregnant in high school, or like single motherhood is really, really hard. And that is a burden that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, is having to raise a child by yourself. I think church leaders see that, and they see like, oh man, these are some really big consequences. And if these kids aren't careful, they could wind up having to deal with that firsthand, and that comes with really big emotional bills. So a standard is something that should it's something that you should aim toward, but you're not going to find the same kind of consequences if you don't adhere to a standard as you would as if you broke a law. So, for example, like when I was about to get married at BYU, Idaho, I had to meet with Chanel's bishop with her. So we both met with her bishop to have some kind of interview before we got married. And so he ran us through the interview. We got out of the interview, and then he was like, I'm just going to give you guys some rules because I know that your wedding is like a couple months out. And so I was like, all right, sure. And I don't remember a lot of the rules, but the only ones that I remember, he was just like, all right, so when you're in the car, just make sure that you're in different rows of the car when you're driving together. And then just make sure that if you're talking on the phone, that you don't talk on the phone for long periods of time. And I was just like, I did not understand that at all. And I was just like, okay, I understood though, to separate this guy from the institution of the church. I was just okay, this guy. But I also understood the reason why he was giving us these rules is because he has had to deal with a lot of people who faced really heavy consequences, and he probably had to help a lot of people walk through the repentance process and face so much sorrow and suffering because of it. And he's saying, you can avoid that just by doing X, Y, and Z. Now, I was old enough that I understood, like, okay, that's you. I understand the law of chastity. I've prayed about it. I know what I need to do. I know what I'm not going to do. I had already set up my own personal standards for dating. And so I took his advice and I kind of set it aside and I said, okay, I understand it. I appreciate that you gave me that. I know where it's coming from. Great. It really didn't apply to us because Chanel was a country apart for our entire engagement. Like she went home to be with her family before we got married. So I was just like, all right, yeah, whatever. But I was able to separate that, it's just like, and that's what you need to do. It's just like, this is just a person. You should probably separate that from the institution of the church and say, this is a guy, and it's coming from a place of love. Like, I don't see this as this like manipulative, power hungry guy who's just trying to get people to obey his little rules or anything like that. It's just like, no, he cares about you and he wants you to stay happy. And he knows that your happiness in this life and in the next life depends on your family situation. And like, you're going to be very, very happy if you can be in a stable marriage where both partners are faithful to each other, the mother and father love each other, and the kids are raised in a healthy, happy home.
Right. Well, and to your point, like, I think that it is out of love, right? Because a lot of people don't realize that the church leaders are completely powerless over you, right? Yeah. Like, what else can they do except share with you what they think you should do? That's all they can do is share their rules and guidelines on how to approach this. Because, I mean, there's some out there, probably some bishops who, if they could force you, they probably would, right?
Oh,
but they can't. Yeah. They can't do that. So the thing that all these ex-Mormons and anti-Mormons who kind of pull up these rules and say, I was forced to live this way, they always forget, or I guess they weren't listening in class, is that you have free agency. That's like one of the pillar principles in our gospel is free agency. And when things like these come out, like these rules for celestial dating, your agency is implied. The only way these can come out as these suggestions is to help you in your agency make the best choice. So when I hear people say, I was forced to follow these rules, well, you need to talk to your parents for one, because your parents are the ones who are impacting your agency at that age, if anyone. They're the only ones who can. Right. So it wasn't the church. It wasn't the bishop. The bishop just wrote this letter and gave it to you and your family and said, please just don't do these things. And then your parents are the ones saying, hey, these are the rules of the house. And then you're the one being rebellious and gothic in your basement, wishing you could go and make out with everybody you could see. Right.
Right.
So like that's
everyone has an emo phase. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it all drills down, is that, no one was ever forced to live by these rules by the bishop. It just doesn't Doesn't work.
Right.
And if you did have an instance like that where the bishop was trying to force you to follow rules that weren't per the church's guidelines, then that's a bad bishop. He doesn't, you gotta, like you said, extract him from the foundation of the church there and say, this is a weird guy who's doing weird things and shouldn't be listened to. So everyone needs to stop turning off their brains and actually use their agency to take this information, take the rules from that are good, right? And then just put aside the other ones that you don't want to follow. Like, that's not going to serve me at all.
Yeah.
It's almost like we have a personal direct connection with Christ and we can use revelation to maneuver our way through life. This is a crazy concept. Yeah. Something we all seem to forget as soon as the bishop hands us a to-do list like this, Yeah. It's like, okay, well, I don't know. If people are going to turn off their brains like that, then they deserve a checklist of things to avoid or to do.
The other part that I wanted to touch down on was the BYU campus rule thing about like, hey, you're not allowed in the bedroom of someone else at BYU. Let's keep in mind, this is a tithing subsidized education of a private institution and a religious institution as well. You're complaining about the rules that they have set up. If you don't want those rules, there are so many other colleges out there. It's like, hey,
right.
I feel like you kind of know what you're getting yourself into when you sign up for BYU. Okay, like if you want the tithing subsidized education, then you should be expected to obey the basic laws of morality in the church. Am I wrong? Am I off on that? Like, it doesn't seem like we're asking too much.
Yeah, it's like going to a museum and be like, why are these bones everywhere? This is weird.
This is crazy.
Like, where do you think you went? You went to the church subsidized college where they set the rules very clearly. Nobody's forcing you to go there. In fact, a lot of people want to be there because of how prestigious it's been in the past, right? Like it's how good of a school it's been. So I don't know. That's just kind of silly. Like, if you want to be a part of the club, you have to follow the club's rules.
What this reminds me of is the original tale of Little Red Riding Hood. The story goes that the mother, she talks to her daughter. She says, hey, here's some things that we need to get to grandma's house. So she packs her bag and she sends her on her way. But she gives her a very simple command. She just says like, hey, remember to stay on the path because the woods are dark. Little Red Riding Hood says, all right, I'll stay on the path. She goes. And then she meets a wolf almost immediately in the woods. And the wolf is just like, oh, hey, where are you going? And then she tells him all about grandma's house. And so the wolf gets this idea and he's like, oh, awesome. Well, in order to get to grandma's house first, he says, why don't you start picking some flowers? So she's like, that's a great idea. Grandma would love flowers. So she goes off the path. She starts picking these flowers. And during that time, the wolf goes and eats grandma, gets in her clothes, gets in the bed. And then she goes in there. She knocks on the door, the wolf comes in, and then the wolf eats her, right? And that would not have happened had Little Red Riding Hood just stayed on the path, because then the wolf wouldn't have had enough time to get to grandma's house without Little Red Riding Hood being able to call somebody for help. So the moral of the story that I see here is these rules and dating and morality, they're all designed to keep you safe on the path and to keep you out of the woods. Because there are plenty of strange paths in the woods that can lead to some very, very dark places.
And now it's time to be of good cheer, for heaven's sakes.
I found online a document of atheistic dating rules.
You found a list of atheist dating guidelines from some rando on the internet and are treating them like they apply to all atheists. That's crazy. I've never heard of someone doing that before.
It may seem a little off the cuff, but we're going to turn on our official Jen Psaki news reporter voice and give it our best shot. Instead of love at first sight, call it a series of dopamine and oxytocin responses, because nothing is sexier than reducing romance to brain chemistry.
No ghosting, because ghosts aren't real, but your lack of courtesy is.
No saying, we're soulmates. We don't have souls, just a highly compatible mix of neurotransmitters and shared trauma.
You must have at least 3 dates before sharing an existential crisis.
If you're on a date and they whisper, I believe in us, you must respond with extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and immediately demand a double-blind study on long-term compatibility.
No saying I love you, only I oxytocin you.
No saying morality exists without God right after you cut in line for drinks. We get it, you don't need a deity to be good, but maybe try proving it. Every relationship conflict must be settled by citing peer-reviewed studies. Feelings? No, no, no. Where's your empirical data on why leaving socks everywhere is annoying? With that,
those are awesome.
We're going to wrap up this segment, and we're going to just ask everyone to consider the path of your feet. I know that Alyssa also took all the benefits of the church. She found her husband in the church. She has a healthy, happy marriage because of that. I hope that her kids can have the same kind of healthy, happy relationship. I hope that my kids can have that as well. And that's going to come with some rules and some guidelines. It's going to come with a path. And if they can stay on it, it'll lead them to a very, very happy place. So for that reason, we call her to consider the path of her feet.
And now, Tales from the Mission.
Okay, so for my mission story, this takes place in the Tobacom tribe in Paraguay. I was training at the time. The other that I was training had been in the mission for maybe like 3 or 4 weeks, so he's brand new, didn't speak very much Spanish, but he was a hardworking farm boy from Idaho, so I really lucked out. So one day, we walked into this Indian tribe, and it was pretty far from our area, so we go into this tribe, and we're walking down this big dirt road towards the entrance of the tribe. And as we're walking down, this truck speeds by us, and then it stops. And so we look at each other and we're like, oh boy, maybe someone wants to talk to us. And we were both right. Somebody did want to talk to us. There was, inside this little tiny white truck, was probably one of the angriest Argentine Catholic priests that I've ever met in my entire life. This guy just immediately blew up at us and just started screaming at us, saying all kinds of things. So he was just like, you guys are not allowed to be on tribal land. You shouldn't be here. You got to get out of here. I know exactly why you're here. You're here to take our children and to run experiments on them for the CIA. And I was just like, man, I've heard a lot of them, but that one takes the cake. I told him, like, no, man, that's not really why we're here. We do have members in the tribe, so we're visiting the members. We do have some people that are interested in learning more about our message, so we're going to visit them too. He's like, you get out of here right now! And I was just like, dude, take it easy, man. This is crazy. I was just like, hey, we're going to go visit these members. We got to go tell them, if we're not allowed back here, we got to go make sure that they're aware, and we're going to go remind them about church on Sunday. He was just like, no! If I see you again, I'm calling the cops. And I was just like, whoa, okay, all right. So I was just like, dude, it's all right. We're not from the CIA. We're representatives of Jesus Christ. We represent the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we're here just to spread the gospel. And he was like, yeah, I know all of that. And then he threw a rosary at me, and then he just floored it and just drove off, kicked a lot of dirt up at us, and I was just like, thanks. So I was like, all right, well, we got to visit these members. We got to tell them that we can't come back. If we're really not allowed to be here, I got to tell them. So we start walking forward down this path, and we visit all these members. We visit some of our investigators. And as we're leaving, I look over to my companion. I'm like, hey, man, I don't want to cause any trouble, so maybe let's try going a back way out of here, so that we don't run into the priest, so nobody notices. And he's just like, that's a really good idea. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So we start going down this back road, and we walk in front of this house that I had never seen before. And I'm like, okay, we're almost out of this. I could start to see the exit. And it turns out that house that I had never seen before was the priest's house that he stayed at while he was living in the tribe. And so he immediately burst the door open. He's just like, psh! He's like, hey, what do you think you're doing? And I was just like, oh no, here's 19-year-old me, just like, oh crap. I'm training. This kid didn't know Spanish. I'm just like, oh, okay. And so he came out. He was just like, I've already called the cops. I have called the police, and they are going to arrest you. And I was just like, oh crap. So I told my companion, I was like, hey, go practice your Spanish real quick. And since he was a really cool, down-to-earth Idaho farm boy, he was like, okay. And so he just goes and just starts giving off random MTC phrases that he learned. And this Argentine priest had no idea what he was saying. He was just like, what are you saying? Why are you telling me all these things? He'd just go up like, yo, say K, and things like it was funny. And so he did all of that. And while he's doing that, I get out my cell phone, my Nokia brick, and I boop, 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 and I call up our branch president. I'm just like, President, please pick up. He picked up immediately. He's like, Elder, what's up? And I was just like, oh, hey, Prez. Yeah, not much. Would you mind coming out to the Indian tribe for a little bit? And he was just like, I'm on my way. And I was just like, thank you so much. And so in the meantime, the priest is just screaming at the top of his lungs, taking us to, I had no idea, but he took us to this like big open area in the field with a bunch of chairs. And he told us to sit down in these chairs. So I grab a seat in one of these chairs. My companion grabs another seat. We're sitting there. Some of the members came by, and we started to attract a big crowd. So a lot of people came to look at these strange American elders that were getting screamed at by this priest. And it was kind of interesting because a lot of them actually started to like just throw some smiles our way because they were like, man, this guy's going crazy. And I was just like, I know, right? Like, this is kind of weird. So what happened? Eventually, some chiefs of the tribe come and they sit down next to us. And the whole time, the priest is just trying to tell them exactly why we are the scum of the earth and why we need to be eradicated immediately from the tribe. So he tells that to the chief, and the chief looks at us, and he's wearing flip-flops and he's wearing like jeans with holes in them and just kind of a baggy shirt. And he looks at us, and he's this older gentleman, and he just asks, he's like, "So do you guys like the beans down here?" And I was just like, oh man, I love the beans down here. Now, the thing is, this Indian chief, he started speaking to me in the other language that they speak in Paraguay called Guarani. And I learned that this Catholic priest did not know how to speak Guarani. And I knew enough to be conversational. And so I started speaking with this chief in Guarani. And once the Argentine saw that he was being friendly with me, and wasn't immediately screaming at me, it made him even more furious. He was like, no! No! And so he goes around, he gathers the other chiefs around, they all come and sit next to me, and they all start talking to me and just asking very basic questions of just like, hey, how do you like it here so far? I'm like, yeah, it's really great. They're like, why are you here? I'm like, oh, I'm a missionary from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I actually started passing out some of the pamphlets, and they were taking them. He was like, stop it! No! And so then our branch president shows up on his motorcycle. And then eventually he gets off, and he immediately starts talking with the chiefs. And turns out he was really good friends with the chiefs. He spoke fluent Guarani, and so they all just started speaking Guarani, and this priest was just on the outside of this, just screaming at him like, no, no! And everyone was just like, dude, priest, get out of here. Take it easy. Eventually, the police show up, and they're just standing off. They're just like, I don't know what's going on here. So they approach us, and as they approach us, the priest comes over, and he's like, arrest these men! They are trespassing. I told them to get off, and they came back, and they need to get out of here now. And so the police, they looked at us, and they're like, hey, guys, this is pretty crazy. We're going to leave. We're not paid to do this. He's like, do you guys want to ride back into town? And we're like, absolutely. Can we take a ride, please? So we hop in the police car. The branch president's like, don't worry, elders, I got it from here. So we hop in this police car, and we speed off down the way. And so the police then start talking to us, and they're like, that priest was telling us that you guys are CIA agents here to do experiments on their children. And we were like, yeah, you know us. And he was just like, it's interesting because when I was a little boy, I actually took English classes from missionaries just like you. So he's like, I know what you guys are all about. He's like, that priest was a little bit crazy. And we're like, thanks, man. He is.
Look at that. Yeah.
So it was really cool to see that. But then the day after that, our branch president called us up, and he came over to our house and gave us a piece of paper that was signed by all the chiefs that said that our church had permission by all the chiefs to proselyte in the tribe after that. So it was official after that. So the church was able to start its proselytizing efforts after that one little blow up. And it was really great because while we were leaving, there were a lot of members that saw us in the back of this police car, and they were just like, "Aye, elders!" And we were just like, "Hey!" And so it was pretty fun.
And now it's time for This Week in Come Follow Me.
Today's Come Follow Me, we're in D&C. I want to focus specifically on chapter 6, and we're going to dig into verses 22 and 23. We're learning a lot about personal revelation, and there's a little insight that I wanted to have a little conversation about here. This is talking to Oliver Cowdery, and Oliver had a rough go when it comes to personal revelation. And he had a lot of questions, a lot of doubts, a lot of fears. He was trying to... I think he was just getting too far into his head. And so these verses can help us when we are getting too far into our heads and we're worried of like, is this me? Is this my own feeling? Or is this coming from God? It can kind of give us a little bit of clarity on that. It says, verily, verily, I say unto you, this is verse 22, if you desire a further witness, cast your mind upon the night that you cried unto me in your heart, that you might know concerning the truth of these things. Did I not speak peace to your mind concerning the matter? What greater witness can you have from God? So I look at that, and I think it's really fascinating because it means that if we want to seek greater personal revelation, we can do that from previous spiritual experiences that we've had. So that those experiences don't just serve a unilateral purpose in time. It's really interesting that we can draw strength from those experiences through time to then apply to the present situation and on to the future, which is really powerful because it means that, to me, hyper emphasizes the point of journaling and recording your family history, recording these big spiritual experiences, because you don't know when you're going to need them in the future. But when you arrive at these stormy seas and you're facing the chaos of life, you can then turn back to those journals and pull out the strength that you need, that you were given at a certain time then, and say, okay, he delivered me then, he'll deliver me now. And that can fill you with the revelation that you need to move forward. But I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring up journaling because I recently went through my mission journals and I wrote so much on my mission. That's all I did. I ate food, I went tracking, and I wrote my journals. And I totally forgot how happy I was on my mission.
Yeah.
It's easy to remember some of the harder parts, but after reading my journals, I thought, man, I had the time of my life. I had a really good time. And I had some deeply spiritual moments where if you don't write those down, if you don't cement them into your memory, that'll fade, right? It's very similar to how Laman and Lemuel were able to see an angel, and yet, in the next chapter over, start doubting again. If you don't take those spiritual moments and you don't weave them into your life tapestry through some mode of saving them by writing them down or just deeply committing them to memory, they're not going to strengthen you later. When you have a testimony, this is another thing that's like a mini cultural call out, is that when you share your testimony, or someone calls on you to share your testimony, everyone expects one singular point in your life where everything became clear to you. But no, it's these small moments where you receive a moment of peace from God or some answer to your prayer that builds this, like Legos, you're building your foundation, right? And it's your testimony is accumulation of all those small moments. So if you don't write those down, your foundation will likely crumble a little bit as you get older. So I think that, I think journaling is critical, and not just factual events of history, but actually how you perceive them and how you feel. And that'll help you deeply when you move into some unknown territory in the future and you can't remember the peace that you felt at that moment in history.
Not only can those experiences help you, but they can also work past you in time. So they can also be a benefit to your children and your children's children when they are struggling. And there's actually some study to back this up. So let me see if I can pull up my screen real quick. All right, this is from The Guardian, and it says, why children need to know their family history. The whole article talks about the different benefits that you can that children take away from their family history. Studies show that children who are aware of their family history tend to have a stronger sense of identity, higher self-esteem, better emotional well-being, and fewer behavioral issues, indicating that they are generally better off compared to those who lack knowledge about their family lineage. This is because of understanding their family's past can contribute to a positive sense of belonging and personal understanding. Your journaling doesn't just help you, it's going to help your posterity as well. So your personal revelation that you're receiving right now, today, can be a help to your children and to your grandchildren. We have some amazing ancestors who did a great job of journaling, and I've been able to pull strength from their stories. And maybe we'll read some of their stories later on in other episodes, but they have some great stories. I've been able to look at those in times of trouble and pull some strength from them. So what it turns into is like this big pattern of strength throughout time where children and families, fathers, mothers, daughters, sons are able to look back and say, help me, and get that help from their ancestors through those stories. They learn who they are. They see how these ancestors handled trouble. They learn that trouble is a part of life, that suffering is a part of life, and they get to see how other people played the game and came out on top. And that is the power of journaling. That's the power of family history. And with that, we'll kind of wrap it up unless you had any other thoughts.
No, that's great.
Okay. Until next time, I'm Hayden Holm, this is Tanner, and we're Salty Saints.